Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Propel Virtual Garage. My name is Russ Detonia here in sunny Florida. I apologize, it's a little chilly this morning, so I don't have my uniform shirt on. Needed something with long sleeves, but today we're going to teach you how to change the main connector assembly. Okay, it looks like this over here. We're going to teach you how to change one of these. Okay. Now, luckily for me, I happened to hit a speed bump going about 25 last night and broke a rear control arm. So I'll be changing that out, but it also gives me a good reason to do this video because I'm going to have the rear end off anyway. And I'll be able to show you on the rear end, which is a little more involved because it has the motors in the back. Front end is the same thing, it's just easier, you don't have to worry about the motors being in the way. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is take the wheel off. This isn't totally necessary. This can be done without removing the motors. I'm going to remove the motors because for me it's easier than having to work on the assembly while it's hanging down here and propped up on something. I'd rather be able to just fully remove it from the board and work on it on the bench. And in order to do that, it's a little more detailed. We'll take the wheel off, we'll take the motor off, we'll do the same on the other side, and then we're going to drop the suspension. Okay? So 17 millimeter, let's get this wheel off. A little side note, using these nylon locking threads, you don't want to use this nut more than 5 times. Okay? The nylon starts to wear out and it can become an issue. Okay, so let's just pull this motor off. As you can see, this is flopping around because the control arm is broken. Come on, there we go. Okay, take that off, put that aside, put the belt aside with it. And the next thing I'm going to do here, take my 3 millimeter and get this motor off. Oops, sorry. Take the motor off, it's just these 4 3 millimeter screws and then the little bracket on the inside that holds it to the motor plate. That bracket has already been removed on this board, so it won't be there for me to show you, but it looks like this, and it's a simple 3 millimeter, okay, or 4 millimeter I think, holds it on. Just make sure you remove that too so we can remove the motor from the motor assembly, from the motor plate itself. Okay, let's get these off. Okay, now we're on the last one, so I'm going to support the motor so it doesn't fall onto the ground. And I'll finish that one by hand. Okay, motor is removed. Now we can just let that hang there. This bracket will hold it from pulling on the ESC. Okay, let's take those 4 screws, put them where we won't lose them in our parts dish with our nut. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so here we are at the back of the board. Both motors have been removed. As I've mentioned in other videos before, whenever you take a board apart, it's always a good time to do some inspection. So check the motor pulley gear, make sure your teeth are all good. Also check the gear on the back of the tire. Okay, just give it a quick visual, touch everything. Okay, just make sure you don't have any crushed teeth or anything broken like that. Anytime you have the board apart and you can inspect parts better than you could normally, that's when you do it. Okay, so now that we've freed the motors up from the suspension assembly, now we're going to take out the main bolt like we've shown you in many videos. 6 millimeter up front, 4 millimeter on the bottom. Let me just round those tools up. Okay, and the 4 millimeter goes on the nut on the back, 6 millimeter on the front, and undo it. Pick up any parts. Okay, I've got my limiter plate and that screw, both going in my parts dish. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this around the back side and just give it a tap and push that bolt out. Okay, so I'll come around this side, put this up in there, and just tap that bolt out. You can see it coming out the front there, right? Okay, once it's almost all the way out, take my shop rag and grab it because it can be greasy. And just pull it out, okay? Once that's out, the whole suspension is free to be removed. Alrighty? And now the next thing we're going to do is bring this over to the workbench and start taking this apart. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take off the top of the shock absorbers, okay? That's a 5mm on each side. Oops, let me get my other one. I have another 5 up here somewhere. There we go, okay? I'm going to take my 5mm on each side and give those a crack. Okay, if you can't get them, put a little heat on them. They do have Loctite, but not much. They can usually be popped by hand. But if you can't get it, just add a little heat. So let's take these two off. So all we're doing here is freeing up the top of the shock from the main connector. Okay, again, let's make sure all our screws get put back where they belong in our parts dish. Okay. Now once that shock is freed up, let me pop those out. Okay, again, just a little tap with the hammer. Oops. Just have to make sure you use an Allen head that can't go inside the hole. I hope I didn't damage those threads there. Just a little pop like that. You'll see it pops it out. Okay. Another little pop. And out those come. Okay, put those in my parts dish. Okay, now that those are out, we can free these up. Let's pop those out the top. Like that. And that gives you a little more room to get in here and play, okay? Because the next thing we're going to do is the ones that people have a problem with, these two to remove the upper control arm. These definitely need heat, so I'm going to grab my propane torch. Okay. The reason I like to remove these sockets is because the thread on this bolt is on the back side of it, okay? The majority of the front of the bolt, so that bolt goes through there like this, okay? It's about that long. This much of it is just solid bolt, and then the threads are at the very end, okay? So that's why I like to remove the shock, because that gives me better access to the back of that, okay? Right in there. So that's where I'm going to apply the heat. I'm not sure how much butane is left in this torch, but I'm going to get that metal all good and warm in there. Break down that chemical composition of the Loctite. Get it good and hot. Okay, and that's going to be a 3mm. I'm sorry, a 4mm. Okay, turn it up on its side. Not hot enough yet, I don't think. Nope. Needs more heat. You know, we had a problem with these backing out, so they really load them up with Loctite now. And we've also changed them from a straight head screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, to a 3mm hex head, so it makes it a little easier to not strip them, considering how much Loctite is on there. I'm hoping that's enough to break that seal. Let's see. There we go. She's coming. Okay, it's starting to move, so it's broken. Now I'm going to heat the other side of the bolt just to get the whole thing hot because it's still feeling pretty gluey in there. It's turning, so I've broken the seal, but I want more. So I'm just putting this right on the head of that bolt, getting that thing good and hot. Okay, and that should heat that bolt all the way through to the other end. But if the Loctite is on the other end, I just assume hit it from the other end, and again, that's why I take the shocks off first. Okay, now let's see right here. It's still stiff, but it'll come. Here it comes. Okay. See that coming out. In just a second, I'll be able to show you that bolt so you'll know what I was talking about. Okay, I believe that's freed up. That bolt's red hot, so I don't want to touch it with my fingers. She's still got thread in her. Okay, that's what that bolt looks like. See how we just have threads on the end, right? Okay. First, I'm going to hit it from behind. A lot of dirt in there. I can't even see the bolt. There it is. Okay. Get some good heat. Oh, get some heat. Just keep that on there for a second. I don't know if hope my camera can catch it, but I think you guys get the idea. You can see where I'm shooting at, right? Right in the back of that bolt. You'll see the back head of it sticking out. And that should be enough. Lay it flat again. Twist like hell. Oh, a little more heat. It was starting to spin, but I don't want to strip that, and heat is your friend, and it's free. Well, you know, pennies. Butane is cheap. So why not load that thing right up, get it good and hot. Good and hot. I think it's a German word. And if at any point you see smoke coming off of this thing, kill the flame. Make sure you're not burning the plastic off of a spring, or make sure that flame isn't hitting something somewhere else that's doing damage. Always be careful when you're using that torch because they're strong. Okay, we'll try again. There we go. Nice and easy this time. Okay. The heat is like magic. Again, I'm using hand tools, especially on these two because I don't want to strip a bolt. It's okay to use your power tools, especially if you've already cracked them, got them loose, and then you just want to back them out. I just like to do it all by hand. I get a much better feel for the job I've done, and I just have more confidence that everything is right. It's tough to tell when these are all the way out. There we go. And it's out. Okay, last but not least, two down the bottom holding the lower suspension, the lower control arm, sorry. Again, those are 2 5mm, just like the other ones up top, just like the shocks. 2 5mm, they do have some Loctite, so it might be tough crack. You can add heat if you like. These are pretty easy. Lucky me. And just back those out, okay? Now when you take a bolt out and you see the threads have either white or blue on it like that, that's the actual Loctite. Okay, it was blue when it went in. When you heated it up, it turns white. Okay, get that one out. Now we'll do the next one over. Put those, by the way, these are called barrel bolts because it's a barrel with thread on the inside that a screw goes into. So that's the terminology for that. Those are called barrel bolts. Okay? Everything is disconnected now. So now we just pull the pieces off. Right? So we can use our mallet if we need to. This one control arm off, lower control arm. Okay, and we got the bottom, both bottoms are off now. Now we just need to get the tops off. This one's broken, so I'm just going to hammer it right out of there. Okay, and that one just tap out. Okay, so once you have those apart, you're going to have two sides left, right? So you have a shock, lower control arm, and your motor plate. Now this should also have the upper control arm, but I broke mine, so I have to go grab one now for replacement, and I'll get that and throw that on. But you'll have two equal sides, upper, lower, and motor plate, okay? So now we go grab our main assembly, and I'm going to run and grab my control arm, and we'll start to put it back together. Alrighty, I have to apologize. I did not press record for this part, so this is an edit. I'm coming back. You'll see in the next clip starts off with the lower control arm already mounted in the shocks. I thought I pressed record, I didn't. So now I'm just showing you real quick with new parts. This is the old assembly but these are new lower arms. The arm just goes on, just like it came off, right? It slides right up on there, slide your bolt through, put your screw in. It's that easy, okay? And now, with both of those on, let's continue. Okay, so now we have our assembly and we have the lower control arms are in. Next thing we're going to do is the upper control arms, okay? We've got the first one in place here now. It's just not lined up right, so I'm going to put my screw in there and make circles until it's lined up right. Okay, we'll get that started. Get my screw in there. And just start screwing that in. Now we're getting to the thread part, and that wanted to go crooked. It wouldn't go any further. So you just tap it upright, and that brings that control arm in line. Okay, it's doing it again. So as you can see, it's going in a little crooked. It's going in on this angle. So I'm just going to tap it this way. Okay, and what that does is that pulls that upper control arm in. Just keep doing that in little increments until you're there. Get a metal hammer for this one. Okay. Okay, now to reassemble, we bring our whole assembly over. Face it the right way, first of all. All right. Just get this up into place by hand. Try and get it lined up as best you can. Okay, there we go. Then we grab that center bolt again. Oops, sorry. Get that in there to lock it and start tapping that through. Okay? When you reach a tough spot, you just hammer up on it, keep going until it's all the way through. Okay? Okay, now I've got both wheels on, so the last thing I'm going to do before we finish this job is check our belt tension. Oh, you can put your covers back on too if you ride with them. I ride without them myself, but if you have your covers, put your covers back on as well. This belt is super loose after putting the motor on and off again. So I'm going to loosen these three just a little bit. You just want to break them, right? So we'll loosen these three so the motor can be moved that little bit it needs. And take my buddy bar, put it in there and put some pressure on that. Get that nice and tight, right? Well, tighter anyway. Right there, that's good. And then tighten them down. That's what we want. Stiff, but not tight. Not mushy, not stiff. Right in the middle there, right? So you can see it's got a little bit of play, but not much. Perfect. Give these an extra little tightening. And then go do the same on the other side, and we are wrapped up. Okay, so that concludes our tutorial for how to change a main body assembly or a main connector assembly. It's really not that hard, just a couple different little steps. If you have any questions, absolutely feel free to fire away below. I'm sure I forgot something. As you're watching the videos, you can see I've done these a bunch of times. A lot of it is just tapping, pushing, tapping, pushing, tapping, pushing until you're in line. Have some patience. Don't be afraid to use your hammer, but be gentle. Always be aware that you're not hurting your threads as well. So just a brief recap. We took the motors off, dropped the assembly, brought the assembly to the bench, took the 6 bolts out, replaced a control arm because that was in the middle of the job, but we replaced the main body assembly, put the new one in, put all your parts back on it with your 6 bolts and reassemble, and then tighten your belts at the end. Tightening the belts is an important part. I've forgotten to do that before, where I put the rear end in and I go to ride, and sure enough I go to hit the brakes and I get that cog skip. Yeah. So don't forget to tighten your belts. You don't want to be surprised on the road when you realize that you forgot to do it. So tighten your belts at the end, and then step on that bad boy and go tear up. And that's about all there is to it. This ends our tutorial today for the main body connector. Russ the Tony is signing off from Siesta Key. Ride hard, ride safe, and always ride Propel.